Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Phrasal Verb Victory. Let's jump right in. The verb I'd like to look at today is settle. I'm going to start today with the phrasal verb settle in. After that, I'll talk about settle up, then settle down, then settle on, and I'll finish up with settle for. Up first, we have settle in. Settle in means to become comfortable in a new situation. In other words, to get used to a new situation. Now, we often use this phrasal verb to talk about a new job or a new school or a new house or apartment. Look at this example. Imagine you started a new job. You might say, the first few weeks were really tough, but I'm starting to settle in. Means I'm starting to get used to my new job, to get comfortable. Or in this example, imagine that a friend of yours moved into a new apartment. You might say, how's your new apartment? Have you settled in yet? Now, by asking, have you settled in yet? This means, have you unpacked? Are you feeling comfortable in your new apartment? In other words, are you used to living there yet? Are you comfortable living there yet? Next, I'm going to talk about settle up. Settle up means to pay for something that you owe money for. Now, this could be money that you have to pay for a bill, for example, at a hotel or a restaurant, or it could be money that you borrowed from somebody. Look at this first example in a restaurant. You might say, the restaurant is about to close. Let's settle up the bill. This, of course, means let's pay the bill. Or this example at a hotel. There's no need to pay now. You can just settle up when you leave. In other words, you can pay when you leave. Moving on, settle down. Use settle down to talk about becoming quieter and calmer. And we often use this word to talk about our kids or our pets. And we can also use it to talk about our lifestyle. For example, settle down now, it's nearly time for bed. You might say this to a very active child or a child that has lots of energy before going to bed. As I mentioned, we can also use settle down to talk about our lifestyle. For example, I've lived in the city for so long. Now I'd like to settle down in the countryside. By saying I'd like to settle down in the countryside, this means I'd like to live a quieter, calmer life now. Up next, settle on. We use the phrasal verb settle on to mean agree, or in other words, to come to a decision. For example, we've settled on blue for the new company logo. Maybe you were discussing this with your coworkers and you finally made a decision. We've settled on blue. Or like in this example, imagine your friends are having a baby. You might say, the baby will be born in a few days, but they still haven't settled on a name. And lastly today, we have settle for. Settle for means to accept something that was not your first choice. In other words, you accepted something because what you really wanted was not available. Look at this example at a restaurant. The beef was sold out, so I had to settle for chicken. Now, in this example, of course, beef was my first choice. I really wanted to have the beef. However, it wasn't available, so I had to accept chicken. I had to settle for chicken. Or in this example, I will settle for a lower salary as long as the company lets me work from home. Of course, I would prefer a higher salary. However, I will be willing to accept a lower salary if I can work from home. Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you know somebody else who would find this content useful, please share it. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks again.